Welcome, everybody, to It Tastes Different Gaming Appetizers. What's on the news today? Studios are asking Xbox to drop the Series XS requirements. All right, before we jump in, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit those notifications. And let's roll into this. According to this article, many developers have been sitting in meetings over the past year, desperately trying to get the Series S launch requirements dropped. According to VFX artist Ian McClure, he responded to a post from Jeff Gerstmann, formerly of Giant Bomb, who said he believes Series S is holding back next-gen games. And he is not the only one. There's been going around for quite a while. The Series S is the console that is $200 cheaper than the Series X. It's also a lot less powerful. It's a 1440p resolution max, no disk drive, things like that. The article also continues to go on and saying Gotham Knights, which is recently confirmed to only run at a max of 30 frames a second. And they're suggesting that is because the Series S is holding it back on consoles. That's for everybody. So let's jump into the tech guys over here, because these are definitely more tech than I am. So, Nick, what do you think? Is the Series S that much of a iron ball on the game developers, or what?
It's the iron ball. Yeah, I would agree. It probably is. I understand the Microsoft's wanting to make something affordable, right? And that's pretty much what the Series S is touting, is power and affordability, right? And they're trying to be more consumer friendly in this case, right? And that's how they've been marketing themselves and doing things that are consumer friendly. And the Series S is a consumer friendly product because it is $300 and it's affordable, and people can go out and buy a next gen console in the Series S if they can't afford the $500 counterpart, the Series X, right? But on the flip side, that's where you hinder your market, right? That's where your developers, that's where you hinder them, because now they have to develop for the Series X and the S, right? They can't make a X only game. Microsoft's not allowing it. If you allow developers to make X only games, then now that, and Microsoft's in a bad predicament now, right? Because let's say they wanted to drop that, but they can't. Now they have a player base that has those. And if you drop that, that's just giving the middle finger to those people that went out and bought a Series S and not an X, right? So, yeah, I mean, it was a good idea as far as being consumer friendly to consumers, but a bad idea on the developer side, right? That's why we see, we have this aspect with like the Switch, right? And that's why you don't see day one games coming to the Switch as well, right? They're developed later on. They come out later on when they come out to PlayStation and Xbox. Then you see the Switch version like a year later or something like that, right? And that's because they probably develop that version after they're done with the next gen consoles. They could do that with the Series S, but then you have that problem, right? You have that problem where, again, to the consumer, it's going to look as a useless piece of hardware, because now they're like the Switch, they're going to have to wait a year or two before that next gen game comes to it, because it is a hindrance to the development of future games, right, from developers. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, even though developers are bitching and moaning about it, there's really nothing Microsoft can do, right? They're kind of between a rock and a hard place on that. Does Microsoft second guess the Series S now? Maybe not, but it doesn't really matter at this point. You have that console in too many people's hands. They can't reverse that decision now, even if it is holding them back. So yeah, they're kind of SOL pretty much for the developers, I think. What do you think, Pat?
I wondered how long it would take for something like this to happen, right? Because now we are at that point where Microsoft is requiring that you make it for both. So that's really rough, because the Series S does have quite a bit of, difference in horsepower. I mean, the CPU, not so much, but when we're talking about GPU power, there's a lot of difference in GPU power between these. Not to mention even the memory in this thing. You're looking at 16 gig versus 10 gig, but it even goes further, right? It's your pipelines that are different. There's 10 gigabits of 560 gigabits per second RAM in the Series X with 6 gigabyte at the 336 gigabit pipeline, and in the Series S, you're at less than that. You're at 224 gigabit per second, 8 gigs of memory, and then 2 gigs of memory at 56 gigs per second. It's a comparably slower machine in every aspect of everything except the CPU. The CPU is marginal difference in that thing, but the things that count, your memory and your GPU, it is a considerably less powerful machine. And they're telling developers that if you want to put out on our console, you have to make it for both. And how do you do that without different development cycles, right? You either have to make a game that can run at such low specs and high specs, which takes a lot more development cycles, or you just don't do it at all, right? Everybody's going to maybe you're going to start having a lot more developers go, well, we're going to the PlayStation ecosystem. As you had mentioned, there's games that come out on Xbox and PlayStation that just don't come out on Switch because it's just not capable of doing it. And we're going to run into that with the Series S eventually, in my opinion. It's going to become, Microsoft's going to have to give the green lit for some of these higher end AAA games. But some of the games that developers that were listening here aren't pumping out like amazing quality games, and they're complaining about the development cycles taking to develop for both the X and the S. So, and Microsoft is in a predicament. They can't just abandon this console now. It's just not something that they can do unless they want to do some buyback program, about the only way they're going to be able to do this is we're going to give you full credit for a different console, but then they're losing their ass hand over fist in that deal. Or they tout this thing as a streaming only console, which is really going to piss people off, Microsoft's only option here is to give developers the option not to, but then you're going to piss off your consumers who only bought the Series S and now can't play this new AAA title or whatever game because developers didn't want to take the development cycles to make this thing run on their potato. I kind of wondered how quickly this was going to happen because we talked about, I guarantee, we kind of had a bet going around here when the X and the PlayStation 5 came out about how long it was going to take before Sony and Microsoft before they stopped holding developers to the fire of developing on last gen consoles. And the big deal was a year. And I guarantee you it would have been a year on the dot or sooner if COVID wasn't around, right? And COVID was the biggest thing. It slowed down production of those consoles. And they made games for the older consoles for longer than they wanted to. And now Microsoft has put developers in the same boat again with this console. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to make a value console, but I don't think they should do that. I hate to say that, but they are hurting the ecosystem, the gaming ecosystem, because now they're making developers spend as many cycles to try to make this game work on everything, instead of developing to run on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Now you got to throw in a low end console into there that's just what's going to happen in 3 years from now. Microsoft is not going to have a replacement for that console. They're going to basically say, yeah, we have to buy Series X if you want to play any new games with a console that's got a 3 or 5 year lifespan rather than the typical lifespan of a console, which is much longer. It's a tough predicament that Microsoft's got themselves into, but I don't see a way out for them neither. They're stuck. That rock in a hard place is really two rocks. But what about you, Shane, man? What do you think about this pickle that they're in?
They made a last gen and a half device along with their current gen. And
would you call it a last gen and a half? I mean, because if you compare like the Series S,
the Series X,
to the Xbox One X,
the One X, yeah. See, when it was first announced, you had even brought that up because there's a lot of things that the One the One X. God, those naming conventions are awful. The One X has a lot better features than the Series S. Yes, God, stupid naming. And yeah, I mean, you can do certain things. The solid state on the Series S is nice, things like that, but you still got more horsepower under the One X, if I remember correctly. Uh, it doesn't. I love that Microsoft did this. I love that they tried to keep a value going. The problem is they're going to hurt their they're going to hurt their overall by forcing this. Now, if they need to get to the point where they say, "Look, it's just not feasible to do this." But you, like you brought up, if you want to play next gen, you're going to have to stream. It sucks, but you're going to have to. I mean, the One S is like a Switch, that's permanently docked. I mean, it is a last gen. Yes, it's a much powerful. It's more powerful than the Switch, but it's still underpowered compared to the true next gen consoles, which is the X and the PS5. Uh, uh, if a game is being locked at 30 frames a second in this day and age, come on, that's pretty jacked up. Now, granted, the developers can do a hell of a lot better than that. They're choosing a lazy way out, in my opinion, because the Series X or the Series S can handle better than 30. It's just the way things are developed for it. I mean, you can see all the time with people doing their tech specs on it. This is running at 60, this is running at 120 on this console, and so forth. The S can handle better than the 30 frames. Problem is do developers need to be doing it if they don't have to? I mean, yeah, I don't understand how the difference between console and PC, because PC, you have to, when you make a game, it's going to have to handle quite a bit of variations. I mean, because, my PC is, faster than yours or slower than yours. I can run it high, you can run it medium. So, I mean, I'm not a tech guy. That's why I called you guys tech guys.
They have answers to that. They put out minimum required specifications, and if your PC doesn't meet it, then you don't get to play it. And they're supporting only a few gens of hardware back. They're like, we're building a game based on hardware that's, a couple of years old, 2 or 3 years old, 4 or 5, depending on what their development cycles are. They don't have to worry about if your PC is too old or doesn't have the minimum specs, because that's your problem, not their problem. That's the way that they develop on PC. I mean, they're saying, hey, you want to play this game? It takes 4 cores and 2.5 gigahertz processor with 16 gigs of memory and, a Radeon this or GeForce that. And if yours is below that specs, it may work, but it may work at potato level, but they don't guarantee that it'll work.
That's true. One thing Microsoft's going to end up doing is they're going to have to tell the third-party developers, look, if you want to make it purely for the X, go for it. But they're not going to do it until they can start running games out the pipeline. I mean, they don't have enough coming out right now. And, they can't really say, hey, if you get the Series S, you can play everything. They need to say, if you get Series S, you can play everything now, but maybe later it's gonna be left behind, is what's gonna happen. I mean, look at the problem Switch has. The game comes out, Switch gets it a year or two later, it has to stream because it can't handle it, and even then the streaming on it's bad. Now, granted, Microsoft could probably handle the stream better than Nintendo can, but still, we've all talked about it. Infrastructure sucks. Streaming's a bad idea for us. So. But I think it's got to go. The requirement does, because it's going to hurt the industry overall.
Well, how do you enforce that though when you're still selling this thing and telling game developers they don't have to develop for it. So that in my opinion, that's an anti-consumerism move, right?
You're absolutely right. But it's also anti-consumer to hold everybody back.
Well, it's anti-developer. It's not anti-consumer at that point. They're protecting their consumers.
Because yes, but they're also hurting the consumers too. Because think about it. Why should I be playing a 30 frame a second game as an example when I can be playing 120? Gotham Knights, I think, runs 120 on PC. So,
well, I mean, the answer to that is that they shouldn't have released when they did if they've got that limitation. In my opinion, they should have put more development cycles into fixing whatever the bottleneck is. Because in a PC environment, just because they say it can run 120 hertz doesn't mean your damn computer could do it.
Exactly.
If your computer doesn't meet the specifications required to run 120 hertz, or 120 frame, you ain't getting it. It's just that plain and simple. And it runs at whatever. But I'm not a developer. Okay, I don't know the development kits for the X versus the S. I don't know I know what the difference is in hardware, but the architecture is the same. So why can't you just make a game and it detects the hardware, firmware information that games they have access to the hardware level through the kernel that says, I want this. If I'm detecting that I'm running on an X, I'm going to get you these specs. If I detect that I'm running on an S, I'm going to give you these specs. I kind of am a little bit not understanding what it is. I understand they don't want to develop for such a low end console, but to blame a whole development cycle, a development release on the lower to say why we can't do the higher seems very much pandering and thinking everybody's an idiot, in my opinion.
And I would agree. I would agree.
Which that game is getting railroad anyway for being a big old pile of shit. So, it is going to be what it is, and we'll see what it is once everybody gets to play it. But I have a feeling that it's more of the developer turning out a piece of crap than the console hindering them. I understand you don't want to develop for the lower end hardware and also support lower end and higher end hardware. So make sure that it runs the minimum that you need it to, even if it's at 30 frames per second for that Series S. And then you're getting your 60 hertz or your 60 frames per second or whatever you're supposed to be getting on the X and the PS5. So be it.
Yeah. It's for our example that we're using right now. It's lazy development. It really is. It's just they shouldn't have put it out, or at least they shouldn't have put out the same version for all consoles when they should have been able to say, okay, we got this.
Gotham Knights was supposed to be originally for the Xbox One, PS4, PlayStation 5 series and all that. And they dropped the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One editions of the game, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so. So it's like, what have you been doing since then? Because it didn't seem like because that 30 frames and the kind of how it is today, for that game in particular, it seems like that was optimized for the lower end PS4 and Xbox One X versions of the games, and not for the next gen. So it's like they added some next gen bells and whistles, but not really much. But I mean, like the only thing that I think Microsoft can do as far as going back to Microsoft's Series S stuff is if they do say you can make Series X exclusive titles where it's just coming to the Series X. Kind of like what Pat said, the only thing you could do then is, let's say Gotham Knights was a Series X only game, then the Series S could stream that game, right? Kind of like they do with Switch, with those games on Switch. And then, if a developer does want to make a game for both, then it comes out for both. Otherwise, it still comes out for the Series S, but it comes out as a streaming only title for the Series S and not natively for it. So that's the only thing they could do.
Yeah. And I can understand, because this, Warner Brothers has claimed that there's some features that they couldn't put into play that they wanted to because of the Series S, which make complete sense to me. I understand you have to spend cycles, whether it's CPU, memory, GPU, CUs, whatever, to be able to have certain features, like they specifically did untethered co-op play. Makes sense to me. Locking an FPS on all consoles because of the lower console, to me, that's asinine and false. They just unprepared for the release, in my opinion. But I agree that certain features can't be in the game because they have to be able to have enough. You have to have enough hardware to support that. If I wanted to play co-op with all of my friends and somebody in the group had a Series S, they're going to drag down the performance. Of course they are. Makes sense, right? I can't have untethered co-op if one of the friends that I'm playing with isn't capable of caching all the information and cycling through it fast enough. Makes sense. But locking all consoles to 30 frames per second because the lower end console can't handle it, somebody's being untruthful here and thinking everybody's an idiot on the other side of the screen.
Well, I mean, you are talking about Warner Brothers, the people that brought you Black Adam. So we can see how crappy they could be.
That's wrong. Just wrong.
Movie looks like shit.
Whatever. I'm going to watch it.
I know you are.
You're going to watch it too.
I know I am.
Talk shit all you want. You're going to watch it.
But yeah, it's a crappy thing that they've done, but it's a crappy position Microsoft has put themselves in. It
not only themselves, everybody.
They'll develop. Yep, the consumers, developers. I mean, if it's even hurting PlayStation, that's
60 frames per second. They're getting locked to 30 frames too, aren't they?
Yep.
So I mean, they're blaming that, but the biggest thing is game features, right? Like they're saying that they couldn't have untethered co-op, which if you don't know what untethered co-op is that, you can't get too far. You have to be with it, all that kind of stuff because of the Series S. That is hurting Xbox X and PS5 players. That's hurting them. Also, they're saying a bunch of features were removed because of this. That really is hurting us, right? Like, because we'll get more into it later, but there's features in that game that I was expecting to see that didn't get to see, and they're blaming a lot of this stuff on the S, which I can understand some of it. 30 frames per second locking to the Series X and PS5 doesn't make sense to me.
Nope, it's a load of doo-doo. It's a crappy situation. If you have a Series S, definitely let us know what you think of it. I've been wanting one just for a travel device. When I go up to St. Louis or I'm driving down to Georgia or whatever like that, perfect to throw in the car. Something teeny tiny, blah blah blah. But you guys have anything else on this? All right. Well, again, thanks for listening. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, let us know what you think about this situation. Let us know if you got the Series S, what you think about the console. I personally never put too much thought into this here lately, and this article came out, and I'm like, oh, crap. Yeah, that's right. I forget that's a thing. So let's hope it works out for the owners of the S, and we will see you next time. See ya.